Okay everyone, this is the second part of the Creative Composite tutorial, and so here I'm going to sort of run through how I have applied the color to the image. And so in the previous section I showed you how I pieced all of these different elements together, the masking, the different layers, and the adjustments to the sort of overall image and specific parts of the image. And so in that tutorial I had created a lot of masks which I've actually saved here, which is going to come in really handy and kind of speed up this process. So these are sort of the base colors that I've used here. There's 4 different colors: the foreground, the sky, the hand, and the shells, although the shells all have a slightly different color, which you'll see I'm going to apply. So I'm just going to go ahead and start populating this file with my colors. And so essentially I'm just sort of working with a color layer on the blend mode color, and I'm just going to start adding my masks in. So I've got my shells, and then the hand, and I'm putting them all in a group because I'm going to be making other adjustments inside there and other selections just to kind of give a bit more of a variation here. Applying this sort of flat color, as you can see, it's pretty yeah, flat, but you know, to bring in some of that realism, really we wouldn't be seeing such saturation, let's say, in these shadow areas. So that's where I'm going to go in and really fine-tune and rework these areas to be maybe a bit less saturated, or maybe bring in even a little bit more color, because as you'll see, we've got I chose to kind of have a blue foreground and I guess a beige or yellow sky, because why not? And so I do really want to make sure I bring in a little bit of this golden yellow color, as if it's sort of coming off from the sky, and it's sort of casting this nice warm yellowish glow. All right, and so here on the left, this is the final image, and as you can see here, as I'm just kind of getting going with my basic layers started, we've got quite a bit more work to do to get it to that spot. So I'm just going to get in right in here, and so yeah, the first thing I mentioned is these shadows. So really, the shadows should not be that saturated. So I'm going to use the color range tool, which is a awesome, lovely, great tool for making some really quick selections without doing all of that heavy work that comes along with it. And so I'm just going to sort of desaturate it out of some of the more highlighted areas, and actually maybe it's not quite the right mask, so let's go back and try this again. So maybe that's just a little bit less, kind of all we need. Okay, so that's definitely better. See that saturation, and I'm just going to jump up into the hand as well. Might as well reuse this layer. And I'll do the same thing here. All right, so even from there to there, it's definitely looking a lot better. And why not go right ahead and do the same thing with the shadow of the hand and the shell. And so because these are all within a group that's got a sort of mask on it, it's really only being applied to this specific area. Okay, that's looking good, looking a lot better. Maybe let's also do that up on the, now that I've removed some of that saturation, I feel like the sky is looking a little bit too heavy there. Or not heavy, but maybe heavy in color, but overly saturated. Okay, so that's better. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go down to, back to my shells here, and I'm going to try to give each of them just a slightly different color. So I'm just going to refer back to my image here, where I can see that the sort of piece of seaweed is more blue, and we've got a little bit more of a reddish tint to the smaller shell. And actually I'm going to do that using, just kind of switching changing the hue. And this is where I got to go in and do a little bit of masking. I'm going to be a little bit quick with this, but you get the idea that typically masking does require a lot of time and love, so you definitely want to not want to speed through this part of the process, because if anyone can see that you've made some masks that are maybe a little too choppy, or the edge doesn't match what it is that you're sort of making an adjustment to, then it's really going to give away your work. And this will be definitely more on the tricky side. I've likely got a brush that's a little bit too soft for that edge. So I'm going to adjust my brush size as I'm kind of moving through this. Okay, so that's still a bit rough, but for this purpose I think it's okay. All right. So I'm going to try to also bring in a little bit of that sort of warm glow into the highlights only. So I'm going to try to make a selection here of just the highlights. And I want to make that more of a yellow. There we go. Just so it seems, it sort of appears that that yellow is kind of reflecting from the sky. And maybe a little bit too much over here. I'm just going to paint some of it out. And I think we could even use a little bit more of a desaturation and even darkening in some of these spots. Okay, I'm going to jump up to my hand here, and I'm going to do the same thing where I select the highlights. Oh yes, and one thing I want to is just bring back that sort of, oh, never mind. I think what I was wanting to do is maybe, yeah, there we go. Let's just remove that, bring back some of the saturation just to the nail color, at least just in the thumb. Okay, and so I think I'm just going to keep on going here with adding in that sort of yellow highlight. So I'm next going to do that on the sand here. It's looking great. Okay, so there's just a few sort of quick adjustments, and as you can see, comparing to my previously edited image, I'm getting a lot closer pretty quickly. And so there's, you know, little things that I might see that I sort of shifted this to a bit more of a green or cyan, maybe a little bit too red, just to maybe help that hand stand out a bit more. You can always sort of play with the opacity if these things end up getting too much. And I've just set that adjustment to color mode. That way it's not going to make it lighter or darker. It kind of got a little bit too hot there, even though I only really just adjusted the hue. And so I definitely, there's still, you know, we kind of zoom in here. Here, let's drag this over. Actually, it's still quite different, but here, let's just kind of take a closer look. I think I've sort of painted in a bit more of these pink nails, and as you can see, even along this sort of bottom part here, I've even reduced how bright it is, as well as the overall saturation as well, and then really just try to create more of that variation by just adding more adjustments, making more selections using the color range, and adding all kinds of different adjustments sort of within each category, or each section, I should say. Okay. And so really it just takes a little bit more fine-tuning and tweaking to get it looking the way we want it. And I'm just going to jump ahead to the final part of this, where I'm going to take all of the images that I created for this. And so really there's no, you know, it's the same idea over and over with all of these images. And with each one, I've just had a different hand that had to be placed into the layered file that was then masked and had all the same changes applied. And so I've got my, you know, starting point with no hand, and then a couple different frames of it kind of coming in and out. And so let's create our animated GIF. I'm going to load these all into Photoshop. And so I'm just loading them as layers, and going to open up my timeline here to create a frame animation. And I want to take all of my layers and make them into frames. And so if I just hit play here, there we go. But what I want to do is just slow this down a little bit, just give it a bit of a delay. And I also want it to loop. So I had the intention that the hand would be coming out of the shell, pausing for a second, and then going back in. So what I'm going to do is take these inside frames, inside meaning, so that's my starting, that's my end. So I'm going to take all of the frames in between and just reverse them. And I think I'm going to give this sort of a bit more of a pause on the kind of start and end frames. And let's see what that looks like. I could even let it pause for a bit longer here if I felt like it. Let's see. Yes, that's looking great. And maybe let's do the same thing for the starting point. Okay, and I'm gonna just go ahead and do one final thing, which is crop it to square. So I'm gonna share this on social media, and so I think this is gonna be a really nice format for that. And why don't I also reduce my image size? Okay, and there we go. Last step is to just export this as a GIF. And I could likely play with some of these settings here just to see how the sort of quality, if it looks better with a different kind of rendering option. And hit save, and there we go. And that is how to create a creative composite image, how to take all the pieces and put them together, how to hand color the image in Photoshop, and how to create an animated GIF with the additional frames. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you come back soon for the next video tutorial that I end up doing and posting hopefully sometime soon. Thanks.